start with the basic question. Where does the word DAO or this field, which is called DAO, starts? What's the history of DAO? So let's understand history in order to understand the present of DAO. Hubertus, if you can share with us, what is the history of DAO?
Well, DAO by definition is decentralized, it's autonomous, and it's an organization, right? So if you look back and zoom out a little bit, it has a lot of similarities with existing organizational forms that have been out there since decades or even centuries. So think about, for instance, cooperatives, where members own a part of the organization and they can benefit from certain benefits delivered from the organization. Or think about social organizations, so sociographies, where basically you find the governance based on consensus, right? So you go in circles until you find a consensus, and then you move to the next level. These have been kind of organizational forms that have been around since a while, and what comes now, to propel the existence of DAOs, what comes about is the emergence of two trends, let me call it that way. So one trend is, if you look at it, the kind of emergence of flat organizations, the removal of hierarchies in organizations. You see more and more disappearance of these vertical forms of hierarchical organizations where there is a single person that decides everything and everybody follows. This was a model that worked well 10, 20 years ago, or even longer, deriving from the military, but now organizations are structured in a different way. And everything has also been propelled, obviously, now with by the pandemic, by the remote working schemes. So the fact of being able to work remotely and for people to change their whole character, to appreciate more individualism, to be more master of their own destiny, this has kind of propelled these kind of flat structural setup. The situation is really today that we have these kind of individualism. We have a situation where people care most about themselves. Individual brands count more than brands of companies, so this hasn't been there before. And all that together now with the advent of decentralized technologies like the blockchain has helped the emergence of the DAOs. The whole thing started. If you know, I think most of you guys know Ethereum. It's one of the largest layer 1 protocols. It's proof of work technology with a market cap of about $300 billion now. And Ethereum has actually emerged in 2016 on the basis of a DAO hack, right? So there was the first DAO that was created on the blockchain was in 2015-16. It was a predecessor of Ethereum that launched that. And back then, the DAO was a decentralized venture capital fund. So what the developers there wanted to achieve, or what the community wanted to achieve, is to create a decentralized smart protocol, a smart contract, based platform that allowed people to invest and to deploy these funds into startups. And that exactly was what was basically hacked at some point because of vulnerabilities in the attack surface. There were software bugs and all these kind of things. And roughly I think it was back then $50 million they were stolen, right? Now this would be worth $11 billion. So this was the first experience with the DAO, which was a disaster, right? But from that, something very interesting has emerged, which is now bringing us to where we are, and we can speak about the details.
If I want to create a DAO, how should I think of that? What is the basis of that, Danosch?
An example I like to use to explain what a DAO is imagine a vending machine. Now, a vending machine needs someone to come and stock it up. But then the vending machine will send a signal when it runs out of stock. It will order the new products by itself. It will receive the payment by itself. It doesn't need staff to do that. So most of the functions, and it will deliver the goods by itself. So most of the functions in the vending machines are automated. And a DAO is very similar in that sense. It's an organization that is automated with smart contracts. A smart contract basically is a preset, predefined set of rules embedded in code that gets executed when those definitions get hit. So a DAO is basically an organization where a lot of the decision making is made based on smart contracts. Back to your question, how do you start a DAO? Well, first you have to start with, what is the purpose of the DAO? What is it that you actually want to achieve with the DAO? Is it to raise funds for... So one of the most used cases today for DAOs is almost like they're becoming like VCs. So I might say that I'm a Web3 expert. I'm an expert on NFTs. And I want all of you to chip in, because I believe that if we create something together, we can really make it successful. And because everyone here is experienced with investments, everyone here has contacts, everyone has networks, everyone has something to contribute with, we all join together and become a DAO, a community, whatever you want to call it. And the decision making is on the on the blockchain, so it's efficiently run. Now there are inefficiencies to that as well, but in essence, the idea of a DAO is that it's going to be truly separate from a central authority. Many DAOs are also structured with councils. So let's say we all here agree that we're going to appoint 10 key experts that are part of that DAO, that are the experts, and they should make the decisions, almost like a republic. So we all vote them in, and every 6 months we decide, as a smart contract, that every 6 months everyone here has to vote to nominate new delegations for that council. So that is another way of how to structure a DAO. But if you practically want to set up a DAO, there's loads of tools, like Tribute DAO is actually a DAO that helps other people create DAOs. So there's loads of ways where you can set up a DAO and do it efficiently.
How to maintain the governance, the good governance, to make it efficient and long-term?
Yeah, I mean, there are some fundamental issues with DAOs in general, which derive from the fact that initially you raise funds, you bootstrap basically a community, right? And that means that you need to have financial backers in the first place. So normally these are anchor investors, can be VCs who fund these initiatives, or even, large contributors. But what we've seen with DAOs over time is that we have new community members coming in over time, and the original ones, for instance, they don't care so much about what has happened. They become more kind of sleeping, controlling investors, and that goes against the principle of a DAO, because the DAO is all about community involvement. And I think there are a lot of kind of ideas around how to solve for that problem. So one can be, I don't know, just hasn't been done yet, as far as I know, but one could be some sort of inflationary model that gives new token holders more rights over time and that dilutes the old ones. Obviously, the VCs don't like that, but this would be one way how to govern and to create a more balanced way going forward for DAOs. But I think the most important thing in DAOs, as Danosch has pointed it out, is really about, think about representative democracy. This is what it really is, right? So you elect you elect the board. So before, let me track one step back. So I think the most fundamental thing in a DAO, and I think you tackled it briefly, you need to have not only a purpose, but you need to set the values of the DAO. Because if you have set clear values, what the DAO is about and what it stands for, then conflict resolution and dispute resolution gets much easier going forward, because you have a clear idea on what basis you are founding that, right? But obviously on the execution side, you just need a normal governance. So basically you need a board of people which gets elected by the DAO voters, by the DAO token holders. The question is who has which vote. So this is the discussion we had now with the early investors who have a bigger stake. They can control certain votes. It works like in a public company, basically. Then there are techniques, we can talk about that later as well, which are not necessarily on-chain, which help you to vote, like Snapshot, for instance, to take certain votes on decisions. These are, actions that are not taking on the blockchain, because this would consume way too much gas fees, so it's not very efficient to do that. So normally this happens off-chain. So there is some sort of off-chain, on-chain interaction. So that's probably the way how such a DAO is normally governed.
What are the main risks highlights if it's not done properly?
So there has been a few instances of DAOs that are fully decentralized, where they don't have a council or a board that executes the decisions. So in such a structure, anyone in the room can suddenly just come up with a proposal. And the risk is that obviously that proposal can be counterproductive to the efficiency of the DAO. Now you have to trust that everyone is competent to put forward good proposals in a completely decentralized DAO. So what we've seen is, for example, there was a DAO that invested massively in Bored Apes. So if you're familiar with the Bored Ape Yacht Club, it's one of the blue chip NFTs. And they were holding loads of these. And then one person decided that, I want us to sell off the entire treasury. So the founders of the DAO went to sleep, woke up the next day, and realized that their Discord channel had just blown up with messages. And were like, what the hell is happening? So someone had proposed to sell off the whole treasury, and there were actually people that was supporting the idea. Now, in the end, they decided not to do it, but those are some of the risks inherent to a fully decentralized DAO. And then you always, like what we saw happen in 2016 with the DAO that got hacked. There's also security risks, but the DAO in itself has not security flaws. Imagine Ethereum as the internet. Now, on the internet, there's websites that have phishing links, that are scams, that have viruses, but you also have websites that are fully operational and working. So it all comes back to how much money, effort, and time people spent on securing that specific DAO, which is essentially like a website.
Super. Yeah.
Can I add one thing to that? I think that's a pretty interesting aspect as well. We've seen with DAOs in conflict situations is the whole aspect of social media. Since DAO is sitting on the blockchain and every token holder feels himself entitled to vote, and normally communication happens over Discord, Twitter, and these social platforms, you have a super responsive community. So, and this can become very toxic very, very fast. So there was the famous case of Wonderland Dao, which is the largest DAO in decentralized finance. They have about a balance sheet of now, I don't know how many hundred millions of dollars, so it's pretty big. These guys, they just to tell this anecdote, if we have the time, they had set up a proper DAO governance structure. I know these guys personally, very well professionally managed in the beginning, but what they didn't do is to check who is the co-founder of the DAO. So because in the internet and in crypto, a lot of things happened anonymously. So a lot of things happened over, people meet over Telegram. Since everything is remote and multi-sig, no individual can kind of rug pull or cheat the whole system anyhow. So people trust on the fact that the other person, delivers, solid code and delivers solid projects. And they don't do the usual KYC that every normal person would do in a company or in an organization when you hire somebody. So what happened there is it turned out that the co-founder, or one of the co-founders of the project, used to be, back in the days, I think 10, 20 years ago, the co-founder of Quadriga, which was one of the biggest scams in the crypto history. It was an exchange in Canada, which was rug pulled as well, with a very kind of strange story. There's even a Netflix film, I think, about it. What happened to the founder? He apparently died, and people believe that he probably didn't die. He just exited with a different identity. But leaving that aside, the co-founder of this organization happened to be one of the multi-sig owners of the Wonderland Dao, and that created a huge kind of response in the community, even though the DAO at that point was performing very well. So they did very good investments. So basically what Wonderland Dao does, it's an investment club, a very big investment club, like you explained before, has a little bit the role of venture capital fund. But on top of that, they have DeFi mechanisms that provided huge yields to their token holders. And people were overwhelmingly happy with the whole situation. But then this kind of story coincided with the crypto market crash in late 2000, it was last year, 21. And due to social media, this whole thing exploded in a way that it would probably not happen if this wasn't a public company. It's not like think about an SA company, right, which is listed on a stock exchange. It would be impossible for every shareholder to voice his opinion on Twitter and to attack the board. This just simply doesn't happen. But in these crypto spaces, unfortunately, it becomes very toxic. And it shows that it's still very early stage. It's still unregulated. I'm not sure if you mentioned it as well. DAOs are legally in an unclear territory. So it's not yet clear from the legal side.
But we're going to actually tackle this.
Okay, what a DAO is, what does it fit into, at least the decentralized DAOs as we know them?
Absolutely. And Hubertus, my question was to you also. Are there certain businesses where DAO fits most, or it can be open to any type of business? Many people ask, like, does this business fit suitable for DAO, or shall I stay far from DAO? Or it can be, like, any line of business can be under DAO.
I think every form of organization in principle can be under a DAO. It doesn't necessarily have to be a business. It can even be a movement. It can be an association that can be organized under a DAO technically. And it makes even sense. So in the creators economy, for instance, that you're involved in, you have this beautiful situation that you have these very individualistic artists that everybody believes, is very opinionated, and they believe they are, the only ones, and very eccentric figures. I mean, I don't have to tell you about it. And on the other hand, these people share common values, which then are embedded in a collective, right? So they want to have some sort of collective scheme where they can gather around and share these individualistic ideas, but on the basis of some common value understanding. And for these kind of initiatives, the DAO is also very attractive. This doesn't have to be a business at all. But apart from that, I think for investment clubs, investment schemes, it's pretty interesting. So think about creating an decentralized venture capital or investment fund, if you want to call it like that, or mutual fund. But the big challenge is obviously the regulation. So we're going to talk about it later.
So I want to know about Arts DAO.
Well, I just want to ask here, does anyone know about Constitution DAO? Yes, so two people. So Constitution DAO was a very interesting DAO. There was a group of people that gathered around the fact that they wanted to buy the US Constitution that was out for sale on an auction. So they gathered close to $40 million, and they lost the final bid because it was sold at $42 million. But that was, a very fast way for people to gather around a very, passionate cause, and almost winning the U.S. Constitution. So that was a pretty cool concept.
So what about Arts DAO?
So Arts DAO. So I'm the co-founder of Arts DAO. What we did essentially at some point in last year, we decided that we wanted to help bridge traditional artists and creators into the metaverse and into Web3. And the idea started with that, and we started to build a community around it. So we started with one event where we had 10 people gather around in an artist studio, and we thought we were the only NFT people in entire Dubai. And shortly after that, we were 30 people gathering in the same studio. It was a little bit awkward in the beginning, but then we all started to become very, very good friends. And the next event after that, we had someone that sponsored the event, so we hosted it at the Arts Club here in Dubai. We rented out one of the floors, and we had about 100 people coming. We had Sheikhs, we had VCs, we had artists, investors, collectors, and we were like, wow, there's so many people, even like locals, and they're interested in NFTs. It's pretty amazing. And since then, we've had a number of events, and we have some familiar faces here today as well, some guys that are part of the Arts DAO community. So we had yacht parties. We had an event where we had a few members that met with Gary Vee at the Arts Club. We have hosted several yacht parties with some of the blue chip NFT projects like Doodles, Clonex. Clonex, by the way, is run by a company called Artifact, and they got acquired by Nike for $100 million. And also together actually with Ghaf Capital, we had an event at Bella Restaurant where we talked about different types of projects, coming out of this region and companies that they had invested in. So we built a community, and people always talk about the importance of having a community and having a strong community. So we never had the intentions to do that, but now we realize how valuable that community has become, because what we did essentially was, imagine this room full of people, and everyone is passionate about NFTs, and everyone can actually contribute to the DAO. So we decided, let's start a DAO, and right now we're building it out. So we're launching our own NFT, and that NFT, the people that own it will have access directly to our DAO. And that DAO will essentially give grants to content creators, to metaverse-related projects, to help and nurture them here in the Middle East and help them to accelerate and grow.
Amazing. Well done. Well done. Hubertus, going back to your comment about one of the risks is lack of regulations and the legality of DAO. Tell us more about it, and like if something goes wrong, where to go?
Well, since there is no regulation, there is nowhere to go and complain, because it's at this point in time still functioning in the crypto world. The crypto world is, as you know, is decentralized. It's because of the decentralizational aspect, it doesn't comply with local regulations. But what happens more and more, obviously, is that since this DAO grow in size, they have to become somehow put under a regulatory framework. I wouldn't say that they have to be fully regulated. I don't think we need a regulation for DAOs, because technically we have already regulations for cooperatives, so we could put it under that. But the way how DAOs really work, they are cross-national, they're international, they don't know boundaries. So, the best way to regulate them, I think, is to make sure, and that's actually the job not of the regulator, but of the DAO founders, to make sure, as I've said before, to have clear values, clear rules set, and to articulate very clearly to everybody involved on what basis conflicts will be resolved, right? And that should leave very little room for interpretation. And I think new DAOs are very well advised to set these groundworks very diligently in the beginning, to just not launch a DAO to make money and to raise funds, but to think about what do we stand for and what would happen in certain cases and how do we escalate these decisions. Basically similar to the constitution or the organizational reglement of a corporate, right? It's very similar to that. And based on that, I think it's a more healthy way to do it. But it's a self-regulating organization. It's like an SRO. We know this concept in Switzerland, for instance, where you have also the members regulating themselves instead of responding to a third-party governance body, if you want.
Yeah, perfect. I was reading the other day, Danosch, that comparison between DAA, Decentralized Autonomous Association, and organization. There's a difference because this is more regulated or has more governance. I'm not sure to what extent this is accurate.
So a decentralized autonomous organization, I believe, is mainly when people have global operations, like say Facebook, when they incorporated Libra, they incorporated DAA in Switzerland. And the reason why they did it is Switzerland has some regulations that are more DAO friendly, but if it's structured as an association. So I don't know the exact technicalities of it, but I do know that if you have a global operation like Facebook has, and you want to bring it under one wrapper and create a DAO structure, you can do it in Switzerland under their kind of association regulation. And that way you first of all, you get all the tax benefits from it, but also you avoid some of the regulatory governance that otherwise would come with a typical organization.
And talking about setting a DAO, and you set Arts DAO, where did you set it? Like, what was the founding phases where you set your DAO? Is it here? Is it outside?
So we incorporated in DMCC, so we have an entity in DMCC called AD/NFT DMCC, and the structure that we have is essentially we are soon to incorporate a foundation in which jurisdiction we are still looking at different jurisdictions to do that, but that foundation will essentially be the one that runs the DAO. And the entity in Dubai is basically giving us the local presence and ability to operate from Dubai.
Perfect. Hubertus, where do you see DAO heading, like in the coming 3 years?
Well, I think the DAOs are basically a phenomenon of the decentralized internet, right, as we know it. And since the internet is growing exponentially, the decentralized internet is growing faster than the original Web 2 internet. I think, everything which is crypto and blockchain based, I believe DAOs will also gain more relevance. But what we will see, since, back in the days, the internet was the sharing, the centralized sharing of information. Now we're talking about the sharing of values. And this is where regulators kick in because they care about retail protection. And I think at some point there will be some sort of regulatory framework that also will take care of DAOs, because some of these DAOs, they have really grown to multi-million or even more organizations. And it's all about retail protection at the end. So I think governments will start to look into that, similar like they look into DeFi and these kind of things. So this will be inevitable. But at the same time, on the technical side, we have more and more building blocks and more tools that will allow these DAOs to be managed and organized in a compliant and proper way. Like, for instance, Orca, which is basically a software layer which you can use for creating DAOs, which help you to create subgroups with multi-sig structures that already help you to govern that. It's kind of a plug-and-play building block for creating a DAO, or like we said before, Snapshot, which helps you to do these off-chain voting events on DAO decisions. So I think at the same time, people running DAOs will become more aware of governance as well. Because at the end of the day, it's about governing an organization, right? It's not something completely Fawazi and weird. It's really something that is very relevant and very similar to what we've seen, as we said at the beginning, to cooperatives and these kind of things. So that's why I believe you will see investment committees. You will see the same corporate kind of structures in a certain way in DAOs that you see in traditional organizations as well. And at the end of the day, it's all to the benefit of the token holders to protect their interests and to make the governance of these organizations in the best way, in the best interests of everybody involved.
Super. And Danosch, similar question to you, like having Arts DAO, where do you see, or where would you wish DAO to head, or see something which is not yet existent for the benefit of better expansion of DAO?
That's a great question. So, I mean, we do see DAOs popping up everywhere, even with this whole conflict between Russia and Ukraine. There was charity DAOs being set up to support people in Ukraine. So DAOs have so many different types of applications, and the space is just evolving constantly. And I don't think it's going to stop with DAOs. I think there's going to be something after DAOs that's going to be, refined in a way. We do also see that there's a lot of consolidation happening. Even though everything is decentralized, there is consolidation happening in crypto, in DeFi, in all the spaces, in Web3. And I believe that that's going to happen with DAOs as well. You're going to have, probably in a few years' time, a few really, really large DAOs. So yeah, that's how I see it evolving. And if you look at some of the recent DAOs, like Ape DAO, that came from within the Bored Ape Yacht Club community. So that's also a very interesting DAO, because suddenly they decided that they have to KYC all of their Bored Ape holders, and in order to give them access to the DAO, because essentially it's an investment DAO. They're creating a token, they're incentivizing their holders, the community, and they're investing into different interesting projects. So you will see more of these pop up, and I think we're just really, really early days right now.
Super. Actually, my last question to both of you before we give it to the floor. Hubertus, if people here from the audience or when they watch the recorded session, they want to be part of DAO or create a DAO, what are the top 3 things they need to watch for?
Well, I think the first thing, as we said, is you need to really understand what the DAO is about and what the values of the DAO are. So what are the guiding principles of what you want to do? It's basically similar to setting up a company, right? Because the DAO is just a different form of organizing an entity, right? I think we shouldn't think of the DAO too much of an abstract way. It's very similar to organizing an association, to organize a charitable group, to organize, I don't know, a football club or whatever, something that is shared around a common goal. So that's the first thing. So it's very similar to any corporate setup. The second thing I would definitely recommend is to not put everything on the blockchain, because in order to be functioning, you don't need to put all the decision-making processes on chain. It becomes very expensive and very cumbersome. So there are tools and, as we said before, building blocks that allow you to kind of create layers which are governed by on-chain, which is normally the financial transactional history of the DAO, or the kind of the program of the content of the DAO, but everything else can happen off-chain. That's the second thing. And the third thing is definitely to think very early on in the process about the proper governance. to get the right people involved that help to protect the interests of the token holders. And part of this proper governance, especially in DAOs, because of the social media impact of all these organizations, because it's sitting on the internet, it's sitting on social media, is communication. So you really need a proper community manager that is able to, early on understand what's going on, be transparent. Transparency is super important in DAOs because it's kind of unregulated yet. So it's even more so important that people speak very open and very kind of transparent about what's going on. So that's, I would say, are the 3 to 4 most important guiding principles.
Awesome. And Danosch, same for you.
So if you want to join a DAO, if you want to know more about DAOs, there's a saying in the Web3 space, DYOR, do your own research. So always make sure you look into what it is and how you can participate in this booming space. So do a lot of research and research the DAO that you potentially want to join. But also if you want to set up your own DAO, I think the challenges are that building the infrastructure and building it, as Hubertus said, in a regulatory compliant way, so that you safeguard yourself for future regulation. That's very important, because there's a lot of DAOs that like the first DAO, DAO, the Genesis DAO. When they set up, a few months later, they were chased by the SEC because they were considered to have issued security tokens. So all these aspects are important to take into consideration, and also I would say investing in a DAO, participating in a DAO, or just if you want to join a DAO just like with any other investment, look at the team. Who is the team behind it? What's their background? What's their experience? So just like with Wonderland Dao, people really didn't know who the team was because they were anonymous, and it went the way it went. So yeah, that's the 3 things.
Super. Actually, I have it's a curiosity for me when I did my homework research, as you mentioned. So because of the transparency and accessibility of DAOs, like that's the concept, like everything is accessible and transparent to everyone, it had the downside of security. Like you can access, like same as the community access information, hackers and criminals can do that. How to preserve security in the DAO community? Anyone can.
Yeah, well, I think this is similar to any blockchain project, right? So the security checks that need to be done, security audits, this is an inherent part of creating a blockchain product that starts with any layer 1 protocol. So the most important thing is you do regular smart contract audits, because a DAO substantially is a smart contract. And there are very good auditing firms around that can do that. Some of them, even close to be listed, so very kind of important players in this whole Web3 ecosystem. So that's a fundamental part to reduce the attack surface, to be critical about it, and to just do your feedback loops before you push out the code to the public. So before you launch the DAO, in simply spoken, make sure that you have stress tested the systems. It's basically similar to any other blockchain. So that's what I would recommend as the number 1 point. But I'm sure you have others.
No, I completely agree.
I would like to thank you so much. Danosch, you wanted to say something?
No, just thank you so much for coming, guys, and thank you for all the great questions. I wasn't expecting that many questions, but I think all the questions were really, really good. So just thank you for that.
It's a great example for an engaged community. We were talking about DAOs, so this is exactly how a DAO should work. So thank you. It was fun.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you.